It had been so long since anyone had touched me, and the thought hit me hard. I wanted to admit then, I felt Hishan's move lower, slowly and gently along the curve of my back. My breath caught in my throat. I tried to speak, but no words came out. My mind was racing, but I stayed quiet. I told myself it was okay, that Hugh was just helping, that I was probably managing things, but I wasn't. His hands paused for a moment, just near the edge, where my top head. I could feel his hesitation, and I could feel my own. Instead of stopping him, I said, "It's okay, you can rub there." To the words hung in the air like something wrong, and as soon as they left my mouth, I knew I couldn't take them back. Ethan didn't say anything, didn't stop either. I closed my eyes to block out what was happening, but I could still feel his hands on mellower than they should have been. My heart raced so fast, I thought it might explode. I was sure Ethan could hear it. He wanted to move, to sit up, to tell him to stop, but I didn't. I couldn't. I just let it happen. Even now, I don't understand why. Maybe it was because IWA is so lonely, or maybe I was desperate or wanted, even if it was wrong, or maybe I just didn't care anymore. That day at the beach, it broke something inside me. After that, nothing was ever the same. If you've made it this far into the story, thank you. I know this isn't easy to hear, and I really appreciate you listening. If you found this video interesting, or if you think someone else might understand what I'm sharing, please take a moment to like and subscribe. It really helps me keep sharing these stories and reminds me that I'm not alone in this. Now let's get back to the story. After that day on the beach, something changed. I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't ignore what I felt, what I saw, on the way Ethan looked at me afterward. It wasn't just a quick look or a passing mint. It was constant. Every time I saw him, every time our eyes met, there was something different about him. I couldn't quite figure it out, but I couldn't ignore it either. I tried to push it aside. When we got home, I did everything I could to act normal. I made dinner, asked Ethan about his day at school, folded laundry late into the night. My hands were shaking the whole time. I couldn't stop replaying everything that had happened. His hands, the way Hellinger, the tension I felt in my own body. I hated myself for feeling this way, and I hated him for making me feel this way about my own son. Maxwell didn't notice anything. He came home late, as usual, his tie hanging loosely around his neck, his face looking exhausted. He kissed my cheek, but it was just out of habit. It didn't feel real anymore. Long day, I asked, hoping for some kind of conversation. He just grunted and nodded. Already halfway to the living room. That was always how it was. His presence felt like an afterthought, and once again, I felt invisible that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Maxwell's nerd softly beside me. The house was quiet, but my mind was racing. I couldn't stop thinking about Ethan, about Hishan's eyes. The way he looked at me, it was like it was all I could think about. Even though I hated myself for it, knew it wasn't right. I knew I should have stopped whatever it was before it went any further. But there was another part of me, something dark, something lonely, that wanted to hold on. It craved the attention, the touch, the feeling of being seen. The days passed, and Ethan said nothing, but his silence spoke louder than words. He wasn't avoiding me, not exactly. Instead, it was like he stayed closer. I would catch him watching me. I cooked when I cleaned, or when I sat alone on the couch at night, and it happened. I didn't stop him. I didn't stop myself. Then came the next weekend. It washed out again, and the house felt suffocating. Maxwell was gone, working a last-minute shift, leaving just me and Ethan alone. Like before, I asked him if he wanted to go to the beach, just the two of us. I didn't know why I said it. Maybe I thought being outside would help clear my head, or maybe I wanted to see if I could push everything away. The drive there was quiet. But this time Ethan wasn't wearing his earphones. He just sat there looking out the window, his knee bouncing restlessly. I wanted to say something, anything, to break the silence. But every time I opened my mouth, the words got stuck in my throat. When we arrived at the beach, it was almost empty. I remember how the water looked so blue, and how Thuan felt on my face. I spread out teeth wells just like before, and Ethan helped it. Set everything up. This time, though, I didn't ask him to put sunscreen on my back. I couldn't. Instead, I lay there with my eyes closed, pretending everything was all right. But even with my eyes closed, I could still feel him watching me. I could feel his gaze, and it made my skin crawl. The real breaking point came later that afternoon. We decided to rinse off in the beach showers before heading home. It was supposed to be quick, just to get the sand off our skin, but then something happened that I still can't explain. When we reached the showers, Ethan stepped under first and let the water run down his back. I stood off to the side and watched him for a moment before I went in as well. I don't know what came over me, but I took off my outer clothes, and stood beside him. The water felt cool against my skin. Ethan looked at me startled. I couldn't tell if it was surprise, confusion, or something else, but he didn't say a word. I looked at him, really looked at him, and said whooshold, "Take off your shorts, do you need a good wash?" I don't know why I said it. Maybe he wanted to prove to myself that I was in control, that I could stop it whenever he wanted, or maybe I was testing him, testing myself. He hesitated for a second, but then he did as I said. He pulled his shorts off. And there we were together alone under the shower. The water was pouring down on us, washing away everything, except what we were both feeling. I turned my back to him and quietly asked help me with my back. Hadn't hesitate. His hands were gentle just like before. But the tension and fear was undeniable. I could feel it in him, and I could feel it in myself. When his hands touched my waist, I froze. The air around us seemed to thicken, the sound of the water drowning out everything else. I could have walked away, could have stopped it, but instead I leaned back toward him. I grabbed his hands and brought them up to my chest, and when I did, he didn't pull away. I can't explain what happened next. I won't. It was a moment quick, full of need, loneliness, and something I won't name. It wasn't soft, and it wasn't slow. It was desperate, passionate, and wrong, and every possible way. But I couldn't stop it. I didn't want to stop it. When it was over, we just stood there, the water still pouring down on us, washing away the evidence, but not the truth. He held me like no one had in years, and I let him woo. Didn't speak after that. We dreed ourselves off, packed our things, and walked back to the car in silence. I kept watching Ethan, out of the corner of my eye. His face was flushed, movement stiff, as if he couldn't quite believe what had just happened. I knew then that I had ruined everything. I knew we'd crossed a line that could never be crossed again, and yet for the first time in years I felt alive. The drive home was quiet at first. The car felt too small, too heavy, as if the air itself was pressing down on us. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, trying to focus on the road, but my mind kept spinning. I could still feel him, Ethan, his hands, his body, the weight of everything we'd just done. I kept glancing at in the passenger seat. He sat there stiffly staring out the window, his face still flushed and his jaw clenched. Then out of nowhere he spoke, "Mom." His voice was low, almost uncertain. I didn't look at him. I couldn't, but I heard him clearly. What just happened back there?" he asked. My heart skipped a beat for a brief moment. I concentrated. I hadn't heard him brushing it off, changing the subject, but there was no point in pretending, not after what we'd done. I took a shaky breath and replied, "I don't know." It was the truth, or as close to the truth as I could get. I didn't know what had happened or why that happened. I only knew that everything had changed. We didn't speak again until pulled into the driveway. I turned off the car, but neither of us moved. Ethan finally looked at me, really looked at me, on for the first time. I saw something in his eyes that frightened me. It wasn't confusion, guilt, or even shame. It was longing. "How long have you felt this way?" he asked. His words sent a shiver down my spine. I'd been asking myself the same question. I looked at him, and it was as if something inside me broke open. I don't know, maybe longer than I cared to admit. We sat there in silence after that, just sitting in the dark. I thought that was it, that we would go inside, tried to forget it, pretend it hadn't happened. But Ethan had other ideas. Before I could even reach for the door handle, he leaned in and kissed me. It started soft, hesitant, as if he was afraid I'd pull away, but I didn't. I let him kiss me, and then I kissed him back, and just like that I lost control of him. Not sure if it was the loneliness, years of being ignored, or maybe the way Ethan looked at me like no one had seen me in so long, but in that moment I let it happen right there in front of our house. Ethan pulled me closer. His hands slid over me as if they were meant to be there. It was like a rush of life came back into me. I felt alive, wanted, and seen for the first time in years. Nothing else mattered in that moment. I don't know how long we stayed like that, tangled together, but eventually we moved inside. I don't remember much about the walk to the door, just the feel of his hand holding. The silence between us, buzzing like electricity. We didn't say anything, we didn't need to. Once we were inside, everything changed quickly. It was as if we had both been holding back for so long, and now the floodgates opened. The next few days were a blur. Ethan stayed close, always finding reasons to brush against me or look at me when no one else was watching. I tried to tell myself to stop. I tried to pull away, toned whatever this was, but every time I looked at him, I saw the same loneliness. He felt it. Was like we were two mirrors reflecting the same need, the same emptiness, and every time I couldn't say no. I didn't want to. At night, I would lie in bed next to Maxwell, staring at the ceiling and listening to the sound of his steady breathing. I'd think about Athon in the next room, about the way Hishans had felt on me and how he made me feel alive again. Then I'd close my eyes and the guilt would coil tightly inside him like a snake. I knew it couldn't last. I knew it was wrong. But I couldn't stop. Tension between Ethan and I grew every day until it finally reached a breaking point one night. It was late. Maxwell was back at work. Andisa was asleep. Ethan and I were in the kitchen. I was doing the dishes, trying not to think about what was happening when I felt him standing bend me. I turned around, and there he was, looking at me with that same look from the beach. Ethan, I said quietly, hoping to warn him. But he didn't stop. He took a step closer, so close I could feel his breath on my neck. Mom, he whispered, his voice shaky, I can't stop thinking about you. I froze, my heart racing so fast I thought it might explode. I wanted to tell him to stop, to go back to his room, to leave alone. But I didn't. Instead, he looked up at him and said the one thing I shouldn't have. I can't stop. And that was it. That was the moment when everything fell apart. Ethan kissed me again, this time harder, desperately, and I kissed him back. I didn't care that it was wrong. I did care about Maxwell, or the life we had. We had built something together, a life, a family, and all I ever cared about was him. Ethan, he was the only one who made me feel like I mattered. But things haven't been the same since that day on the beach. And honestly, I'm not sure they ever will be. Ethan and I, we crossed a line that can't be erased, no matter how hard I try to convince myself otherwise. What started as just a moment has turned into something I can't control. The guilt is always there, weighing on me, constant, but it won't stop me. And that's the part that's the most. I look at my husband Maxwell and my daughter Ava every single day, Andy. Wonder how they don't see it. How don't they notice the cracks that are slowly spreading through our family? Maybe they're too busy with their own lives to see me slipping away, or maybe I've just gotten better at hiding it, but deep down I know it can't last forever. Secret shave a way of coming out, and when they do, the fallout will destroy everything I've tried to protect. I've told myself over and over that this is wrong. Thatathon deserves better, that I deserve a batar. But every time he touches me, every time he looks at me like I'm the only person in the world, I lose myself. Makes me feel alive in a way I haven't felt in years. Maybe I've never felt that way before. And that's the truth I have to live with. I don't know how to fix it. I don't know if I even can, and that's why I want to share my story with you. Maybe someone out there has an answer, something I haven't thought of. Maybe you can help me find a way out of this mess I've made before. It's too late. So please, if you have any advice, or if you've been in this situation or know someone who has, I want to hear from you. If nothing else, let this be a warning. Loneliness can take you to places you never thought you'd go. Don't get lost like I did. Don't let your world fall apart before you realize what's happening, because once you cross that line, there's no going back. Thank you for listening. Please share your thoughts, like this video if you found it helpful, and subscribe for more. I need to know I'm not alone. Sometimes the greatest betrayals aren't the ones we commit against others, but the ones we commit against ourselves.